Welcome back to another video. Today we've got Tattoo Chef is down. That's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about reparations to Black Americans. We're talking about reparations that were already paid in Chicago. And we're talking about a couple of reasons why it doesn't matter how much money the government pumps into the system. The poor will stay poor because of how the system is actually structured. So a lot of times the politicians will give you a little bit of a head fake. They'll tell you, hey, if we do this, this, and this, all these great things will happen. And you have to admit, if you're honest, that good things do happen when you take money from one group of people and you bring it to another group of people. Good things happen for the group of people who receive the money, right? But the negative aspects are usually either ignored or downplayed to the point where it seems like you're a bad person if you would even speak of them, if you would even speak of the negative aspects. So today we're going to be looking at this video of reparations. We're going to be looking at this video of housing equity from Joe Biden. And we're just going to be giving a light critique and explaining why these things aren't going to work the way that they are proposed to work. And the only way for them to actually quote unquote work would be for the government to completely take over the economy, essentially. You would have to limit people's freedom to the point where you're basically giving out housing. You're telling people how much food they can have. You're telling people how much housing they can have, where they can live, which was the exact opposite of the point of this bill, or as it's stated. But anyways, let's get into this first video.
Chicago's suburb is the first city in the nation believed to offer financial reparations to Black residents who suffered from decades of housing discrimination because of racist government policies. Many hope the historic program will pave the way for more reparations in other cities. But some are saying it's not enough. Jermont Terry with our Chicago station WBBM has more.
Across Evanston, there's a push to right the wrong done by the city. Several decades ago, African Americans were redlined. Here's a look at where blacks could live in the city.
People of color, such as myself and my dad, who grew up here in Evanston, just a couple blocks over, this is the area where they could live.
Vanessa Johnson McCoy is a realtor in Evanston.
Years ago, that was not the opportunity, that we just couldn't take them to anywhere.
She recalls the challenges her parents faced in the 1950s and knows the obstacles blacks in Evanston endured looking for housing.
The banks would not allow them to, they wouldn't give them money to buy outside of this area. It was very challenging.
She's pleased to see Evanston correct the wrong through reparations. The city already approved $10 million over a decade to put towards reparations from the pot revenue. Now $400,000 will be available to blacks whose families were impacted by the racist housing policy.
Well, I say it's definitely a start. And I say, yes, we have to begin somewhere.
What this plan is not reparations.
Sebastian Knowles organized the Evanston Rejects Racist Reparations Group. It supports reparations, yet the organization claims what the money can be used for places huge limitations.
Residents are unable to use their funds for anything other than housing.
Currently, less than 20 people will be eligible for the estimated $25,000. The money payments go towards home repairs, down payments, or mortgages. Evanston Rejects Racist Reparations says there's no accountability for the next phase.
You can't take a step forward without knowing what the second step is, and we don't know what the second step is.
Housing is just the first step, and there will be other parts of this initiative.
So Chicago suburb, basically what they did was they gave $25,000, as we saw, out to the residents. And it was interesting, this guy, Sebastian Knowles, who was in the video, he seems like a pretty angry kid. I was kind of the same way in college, so I can relate. I don't try to judge people. I just seek to understand where they're coming from. So this kid, he is actually running for mayor over in his area. He's a Purdue student, and I would assume at age 20 he doesn't know much about buying a house. So if he's watching, I guess this will be a little bit of an education on how the housing market actually works. But this guy came from a rich family. He went to a very prestigious college. He's basically me. He's basically me at 20. So we're going to give some education for all the people out there. $25,000, putting it into the hands of the people essentially what that's going to cause is some type of inflation, some type of market distortion. So I have a problem with reparations in general. I don't think that it's appropriate because you have a lot of poor white people, a lot of poor people in general that aren't black, but it's kind of hard to go back and actually change the course of history through something such as reparations, the blunt tool of reparations. But if you were going to do it, you should tell people that they have to use it on housing, because if you don't use it on housing, you don't use it on actual assets, that money's going to go straight back into, white hands, rich hands. And it's going to cause not only that money to go away, but it's going to cause even greater pain in the form of inflation. So I don't have any problem with people saying, hey, here's the money, and you have to go use it on housing or home repairs, because that actually builds into your net worth. So the next thing that was addressed by the gentleman was $400,000. So this is kind of funny to me because, it's called reparations, but they're giving you $400,000. I mean, most people, if you look at the average net worth, I think it's like $171,000. They're basically giving you 3 white net worths of money to the black community and calling it reparations. So that's kind of funny to me. Like, a lot of people campaign for reparations and you end up getting $400,000. So that, I just think that, that why ask the government for something that they're not going to provide you? Okay. Anyways, let's move into the next video, and then we're going to get into some concepts, which is why a lot of these things they're actually going to be counterproductive.
Streets that run through American cities that have served as dividing lines between communities for generations. On one side of the line, a predominantly white neighborhood. On the other side, a predominantly black neighborhood. If you live on one side of that line, your family is 10 times as wealthy than if you lived on the other side of that line. On one side, your home is valued at tens of thousands of dollars more than if you live on the other side of that line. A big part of what has kept black Americans from having the same opportunities as white Americans have been those red lines. And sadly, they aren't gone yet. So how do we get here? Those dividing lines were drawn on the maps of American cities starting back in the 1930s. Following the Great Depression, the Homeowners Loan Corporation created maps of major American cities that established predominantly white neighborhoods as areas for better investment than predominantly black neighborhoods. They marked red lines around black neighborhoods, establishing them as hazards. While white families were able to own homes and acquire wealth, black families were unable to secure the loans they needed to buy a home and live out the American dream. In 2017, a study showed that only 43% of black adults in the US owned a home. That's compared to 72% of white adults. We need to change that, and we can. We need to make it so that no matter what side of that street you grew up on, no matter if you're black or if you're white, you're able to live in a good house, and your family's able to build wealth for generations. That's why Joe Biden's proposal that we eliminate all regulations at the state and local level that perpetuate racism, that we create a $15,000 new homeowners tax credit to bring in people who've historically been left out of housing opportunities. Joe will make sure that we hold financial institutions accountable for discriminatory practices in lending. Joe will establish a rental tax credit to ensure that no family spends more than 30% of their income on rent. Every kid deserves to grow up in a good home in a safe neighborhood. And most importantly, it'll ensure that a red line doesn't determine your opportunities in life. We can tackle our country's housing crisis together and give every American the housing security they deserve.
Okay, so 3 things were addressed there. Number 1 was that redlining still exists, and that's just categorically false. Redlining does not still exist. So that one, we're not even going to really touch that one. Redlining is illegal now. Housing discrimination is illegal. There's a lot of regulation surrounding housing discrimination. But the 2 that I do want to talk about are the $15,000 home credit and the rent cannot exceed 30% of your income. So we need to talk about a concept called fiduciary duty. So fiduciary duty is a commitment to act in the best interests of another person or entity. Broadly speaking, a fiduciary duty is a duty of loyalty and a duty of care. That is, the fiduciary must act only in the best interests of a client or beneficiary, and the fiduciary must act diligently in those interests. So who are these fiduciaries? I actually wrote them down. We've got a Word document here. Fiduciaries are people such as tax professionals, real estate professionals, executives at companies, and you could include lawyers in there, etc., etc. So tax professionals, their fiduciary duty is to the person they're working for. Reduce their taxes by as much as possible. Get them to pay as low taxes as possible. So the tax code is actually 6,550 pages. So 6,550 pages, all written by politicians, by the way. That's how much leeway they have to save people taxes. That's why Jeff Bezos paid $0 in taxes through Amazon, which it wasn't truly $0, but that's a video for a different time. That's why the rich people save money on taxes, is because the politicians put it into law. So it's the law that poor people will be poor, okay? So fiduciary duty as far as a real estate agent. What is a fiduciary duty of the real estate agent? The seller's agent, or the agent of the person who's selling their home, is to get the highest price possible. Buyer's agent is to get the lowest price possible. So what happens when you have more buyers with more money? The seller's agent is going to get a higher price. So that means that the price of housing is going to go up if you pump money into the system, into the housing market. All right. So it's going to be harder for people to buy homes if you pump more money into the housing market. All right. Next thing, let's address the people should, which is an interesting word to use there, have to pay 30% of their income for rent. So how do you decide, where this person is living? Do you just get to go live wherever you want to, or does it have to be low income housing? Or, can I just rent out a mansion and then just say, hey, I had to pay out 100% of my income, and, how does this work? It creates a moral hazard. That was my point there. So let's look at this 1% rule. Multiply the purchase price of a property plus any necessary repairs by 1% to determine the base level of monthly rent. So this doesn't work with every property, but real estate investors understand the 1% rule. So basically what it is let's say you had a $100,000 house. You take it, multiply it by 1%. That's how much you should charge monthly for rent. So earlier we said housing prices are likely going to go up. So that means that rents are likely going to go up. So the government is going to be covering people's rents. Also, on the other end, as you cover people's rents, or as you can rent something for more, an investor is going to have to pay someone who already owns the property more. So that is going to also boost housing prices. So check this out. Let's say the house is selling for $100,000 and you're renting it for $1,000. Well, let's say that somebody comes in and adds on $100. We're going to give you $100 for your rent, okay? And we could run some actual numbers on this in a later video based on average incomes and see what are the projected effects of this. Well, if they now have $1,100 to pay for rent, the house price just went up to $110,000. Okay, so if you do that again, you say, well, we need to give them another $100 for rent. Well, the housing price just went up to $120,000. All right, so there are second and third order effects of just pumping money into the housing market that they hope that you don't understand. They hope that you don't watch a video such as this and actually understand fiduciary duty of tax professionals, fiduciary duty of real estate professionals, and fiduciary duties of executives. So let's talk about the last topic, which I wanted to talk about, which is the fiduciary duty of executives. So executives work for the stockholders. So the stockholders are essentially anyone who buys into the company, anyone who owns the company. So they want to pay you, the employee, as little as possible so that they can pay the owners of the company as much as possible. That's how it works. All right. So no matter what you write into law, That's how things work. So you want to be on the owner side of the equation rather than on the employee side of the equation. So I always say, if people really understood business, they wouldn't be trying to get more money out of a business. They would be trying to start a business, because they would understand that fiduciary duty says that the owner of the business is the one who the executives work for. So anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, got some value out of it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.